Hello everyone, today let's solve the problem number 180, consecutive numbers. So what the question states here, we are given a table logs with the following structure. You can clearly see here, we are given a table with logs, named logs with the following structure. We have id and num. Id is of the type integer and num is of the type varchar, right? So here id is the primary key and an auto increment column that is starting from 1. You can clearly see auto increment column that is starting from 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 we have, right? So that is what I'm speaking of. So we have to find all the numbers that appear at least 3 times consecutively in the num column. Here you can clearly see only one. Here we have only one that is appearing at least 3 times consecutively here in the num column, right? You can clearly see by looking at it itself. You can clearly notice, right? Here, just give me a second here. This one I'm speaking of. So in the nums column, we have to find all the numbers that appears at least 3 times consecutively in the num column. Here 1 is the only number which is appearing at 3 times consecutively in the num column. So that is the reason we have to return 1 as output in this case, right? So we have to return 1 as output in this case. So consecutive numbers is the name we have to consider here in this case, and we have to return 1 in the num column. We can clearly see 1 is the only number that is appearing 3 times consecutively in the num column, right? So that is the reason we'll be returning 1. We have to return 1. So we have to return the result table in any order. So order doesn't matter here. We can return the result table in any order. Result table nothing but the column name has to be consecutive nums in this case. So I hope the question is completely clear. What we need to do is completely clear as well, right? So this is easier to understand, easy one. So now first let's discuss the approach and then let's write the query, right? First let's discuss the. So here the first step is we'll be making use of the join keyword here. Why we will be making use of the join keyword here? We have to create the sliding windows of 3 consecutive rows, right? So we have to create the sliding windows of 3 consecutive rows, because in the example we saw we have we had one that was repeated thrice consecutively. That is the reason we returned 1. Only 1 was there for the example 1, right? So the output was only 1 in the consecutive nums column, right? In the output. So that is the reason here we'll be making use of the join to create the sliding window of 3 consecutive rows. This is very important. 3 consecutive rows, right? So I hope this is clear. Let's move on with the second one. We have to compare the number values or the num values. We have to compare the num values within each window. So within each window we need to compare the num values. So if all the 3 values are equal, so if all the 3 values here in this case, all the 3 values are equal, 1 1 1 we have, 1 1 1 we have, right? So this is equal, 1 is equal to 1, 1 is equal to 1, right? So that is the reason we have to compare the num values with each window, and if all the 3 values are equal, then only we will consider that one as valid consecutive sum. Then only we will then only we will consider that one as valid consecutive sum, right? So I hope this is clear, easy to understand, right? So the third step here is, this is simple. We will select distinct values. We will be selecting the distinct values to avoid the duplicates. So we have to avoid the duplicates at any cost accordingly with the question. So that is the reason we will be making use of the distinct keyword, or we can make use of the distinct keyword, or we can just write the query like that itself. Right? So in this case we will be making use of the distinct keyword. So SQL provides the distinct keyword, so we can simply make use of the distinct keyword itself, right? So it will be easier to write the query. So this is the approach. These are the 3 steps we'll be going with. So this is the approach that we'll be going with as well, right? So I hope the approach is completely clear. As we are good with the approach, as we have the knowledge of the approach, now it will be easier to write the query. Now let's start writing the. So let's go with the approach. Now let's start writing the query. First step was, if you remember, we have to select the 3 consecutive rows using the join keyword. So we'll be making use of the distinct keyword as well, right? So I'll just go with here, select distinct. So this one, let me go with l1.num as, so this one, consecutive nums. So this one, let me copy this one here, let me paste it over here. This is fine. So this is coming from the logs L1 table, right? So this is coming from the logs L1 table. This one I'm speaking of L1. So I'll just give here from logs. So let me copy this one here quickly, L1. So let me leave the space here. This is fine. So if you remember the step 2, or the step 2 was to join the next row. We need to join the next row as well, right? So we need to join the 3 rows consecutively. So we have to join the next row, the second row. So I'll be going with join here, logs L2 on L1 dot id here. This is equal to, so we have to compare here, right? L1 has to be equal to L2. So L2 dot id minus 1 in this case. And the third step here is, so we have to join to the row of the next, means the third one as well. In the simple terms, we have to join the third one as well and compare the L1 with L3, right? So 3 consecutive rows we have to check, right? So 1 1 1, if you remember here, this one we are checking for. This one, just give me a second. This one I'm speaking of first consecutive row, second consecutive row, third consecutive row. So this one we have to check. We have checked for first 2. Now let's check for third one as well. So now let's try to implement the same thing in the form of query, right here. So join here in this case logs. I should have copied the previous one and made the necessary changes. This is fine. So I'll just type here L3 on here L1 dot id. We will check this one with L3 dot, here in this case instead of id minus 1 we'll go with id minus 2, right? So I hope this is clear. So the final step here is we have to check if all the values are equal or not. So I'll just go with where keyword here. In this case L1 dot num, we will check whether this is equal to L2 dot num, right? Also we have to check here and L2 dot num here whether this is equal to L3 dot num or not. So this is it for the query. Simple to understand, right? So let me hit the run button. I hope this works. Let's see. So here in this case, you can clearly see here the sample test case is getting passed. Means the query works absolutely correct on this case, right? So let me hit the submit button. I hope this works for all the test cases. Let's see. So here you can clearly see all the test cases are getting passed. Means the query works absolutely correct for all the test cases, right? So here in this case, I hope whatever the query that we have written is completely clear as well, right? For now, this is it. Thanks for watching, guys.